Hey folks, Steve here with another Korean War video for you today. Um, and boy, at the end of last video when we did turn 4, I was pretty down on the UN position. Now, granted, with when I look over at the dead South Korean dead pile, that's not a nice story there. That's a bummer. A lot of units lost that are hard to get back. But the the interesting thing was when I finished that video. Now it's been a couple days, so I'm kind of, you know, I'm catching myself back up, looking at the map. Um, what was really interesting was that I said, okay, well, we're this close to the end, and I was about to call it and just maybe restart or do a scenario. But then what I did was I played through the first action phase of turn 5. I just said, well, I won't record it. Let me just hit it, and we'll just see what happens. And if it is a collapsing situation, then I can include that in the next video and then just have a restart. But what ended up happening in terms of the die rolls of the attacks was really quite interesting. And maybe that some of this will all come down to bad depot placement at some point. I don't know. Um, but around here, basically, we have had uh, repeated attempts to besiege the city that has units that were basically out of supply. Um, and as far as I can tell in this game, there's not strictly speaking a, like an attrition mechanic that I could see, and maybe it's in there somewhere, and I just couldn't see it. Um, so these guys being in the city, technically not in command range, no supply depot in range, relying on a fortify marker to maintain their strength, had these repeated assaults from the North Korean divisions outside the city, and just due to I mean, I don't know. They were all kind of weak to begin with. Um, suffered some really bad die rolls, and because of the power of close air support and a variety of things, we ended up spending out the UN player spent out all of their air in the first action phase, at every opportunity, throwing in two close air support in every combat, kept these guys from taking it. They did not take the hex. They could not get out. They didn't even get retreats. I mean, it just like they so it was a combination of low die rolls and bad modifiers that just kept them out of reach of taking the city. Now, it wouldn't have mattered even if they did. I looked the automatic victory would have required them the North Koreans to retain control of Incheon, but we had taken that. And over here, I mean, technically, the North Koreans still have control of Masan, but you're gonna like, I mean, look at what happened down here. So again, an issue of down here, they couldn't take the hex. They just didn't have it. And as each attack, maybe I got a couple of A1s in there. They kept getting weaker and weaker to where like now this city is surrounded on four sides by one step divisions. They're just one steps. That I can't attack out of the city. They don't have enough supply. Their attack is so little that they couldn't even probably take out one division if they wanted to, because everything's like quartered, hardcore. Um, but they could hold the hex, which is really all what they needed to do in the main perimeter area. Again, some attacks, because the North Koreans needed to attack. They had to try to take it because the Incheon landings put everything else at risk. They needed to try to get into Pusan and get that instant victory because they've been kind of caught now in, the rubber banding of, okay, you went really far and now you're going to have to go running back. Is it better to try to take it? And what ended up happening was that because we had our own supply marker providing strong supply the whole time, these units were all able to maintain their strength. Well, these guys were kind of, weaker because we were trying to use, I mean, they could count and get decent command, but the focus was try to collapse this. Um, at least it was before the Incheon landings, I should say. But you can see, like, there's just this garrison here that prevents the UN from bursting out. And in the next action phase, this guy and maybe some help are going to crack through that garrison and start going. This guy's down to a two-step division, holding the path to Taegu. And I don't think he's going to last too terribly long if the UN decides to focus, because the whole eastern bank, the whole eastern side that had, I think, a hefty division and some support, is down to a one-step unit. You might ask, well, what happened? Um, I think I've cracked the code on the combat system of this game, in that, I mean, odds are good. You want your odds to be as high as possible, like any war game. That's fair, right? That's obvious. But man, modifiers are king in this game. Absolute king. And just to kind of show, I'm going to grab combat table. Before I show it, I think what's interesting, and this is appropriate, I think, right, for the Korean War and trying to make it simulated in this game. Basically, you get, where do you get bonuses from? Well, you can get bonuses from, well, I should say, how will the two different sides in the game increase their combat chances, right? How are they going to do that? Well, the communists are going to do that by using numbers, because for good chunks of the game, they will have localized quantity advantage, which means that they're getting their, we'll say, better chances of hurting the enemy and not getting hurt themselves, right? Because the combat table is set up that if the enemy takes damage, the attacker does not. There's no mixed results in this game. They're going to do that by using their quantity advantage and getting as high of odds as they can get. And then to get their bonus, they're going to do intense attacks and all-out attacks, right? They're sort of prepared position attacks. They may use their quantity to move some guys to outflank an enemy, create a situation where they can get multiple units to attack a unit, and then hopefully they have had one unit next to the target unit since the beginning of the action phase and can launch an all-out attack. So it has high odds, and then, the +3. And that's usually going to be the best place that the communist is going to get die roll modifiers. There's also, in this version of the game, I don't think it was in the original, there is like a Chinese wave attack bonus that can be applied. And so that's sort of like the one other place that they're likely to get points. Technically, there's also armor, but over the course of the game, the communists are going to have now a lot less access to armor. They can sometimes still get reinforcements that will include an armor asset, but it's going to, when we get there, there's going to be penalties to the North Korean reinforcements to where they're really not going to get any more armor. And we've managed to, I mean, if I look at the map, there's like 1, 2, 3 armor assets on the map, and probably won't be many more to come after that, and they're going to get destroyed over time. So as the armor drifts away, the communists are going to be relying entirely on all-out attacks and quantity, effectively. That armor's not, most of the time, that armor's not even going to be useful, because the Allies will have enough armor that there's enough anti-armor points that armor of the communists just is not going to work as well. Okay, so that's the communists, right? By comparison, the UN forces have a lot more combat die roll modifiers. They also can all-out attack, right? They also can do armor bonus, and the fact that their armor bonus, uh, they have plenty of armor, right? Let's say it that way. They've got plenty. They've got a lot, even on the map right now. Um, they just have to shepherd it a little, but they've got plenty. And I'm not sure how they come back. I'll have to see how assets return to play for either side, or if the UN can even rebuild them if they lose them. We haven't had that situation come up yet. Um, but they also have uh, naval support on the coasts, and there's still a fair bit of coast, and there's important places on the coast. They get a +1 for that. Um, they've got close air support, which, again, if it's a +2 maximum, that's one thing. But the fact that they have enough air power that they can just, like, every combat of theirs will have a +2. So in the situation around Pusan, where we had a lot of adjacency, we can very, very cleanly get an all out attack plus air, maybe plus naval support in a couple places. And unless the defender had some very good terrain they were defending in, we were basically hitting the maximum die roll modifier. So no matter what the different modifiers are, it can either be maximum of +5 or a minimum of -4. And +5 is quite potent, right? I mean, even if you rolled like a 2, that 2 now becomes a 7, and that can be very drastically different die roll results. So we just look at the combat chart and try to make sense of what I'm saying here. Like, and I'm having a little trouble because the stand is in my way. If you were to try to look at this here, and like, here's all your modifiers. Here are a couple other notes. If you were increasing your odds, and you rolled a 5, like, okay, there's an increase, right? Like, okay, you can more cleanly make sure that you get a DR1 instead of a D1 or something. But that plus, which again for the UN, I mean, they can just throw in air pretty pretty uh pretty cleanly many times on a turn, can turn what would otherwise be, I mean, let's just say you get like a normal 3-1 or 2-1, 2-1 in non-clear. Well, you there's a 50% chance you're going to lose that fight and take a step loss if you didn't have any die roll modifiers. But if it's a +5, you basically make it that you're never going to take a step loss on a 2-1 in non-clear. If you can get a +5, let's say you're dealing with broken terrain, which isn't as good as rough for defending, you're not going to take a step loss. So you might as well roll the die, because you're at least going to get no effect, but you're more likely going to get a D1, a D2, maybe even a D3. And if you're able to get higher odds, which there will be times where you will obviously have much better odds. Well, if you're able to get, again, that +5 on anything, even if you roll a 0, you're dealing either damage. It's more likely that you're dealing multiple step losses. So it feels like modifiers are king. That even when you're doing a low odds attack, if you're able to have +5, a low odds attack might totally be worth it. And so all of that explanation, which I feel is needed because it's going to make up for the fact that I'm not showing you any of action phase 1 of turn 5. We had a whole North Korean division and armor right here that got obliterated because I rolled high. I rolled like, it was a +4 to the die roll. I rolled a 9 or something, and it was, I'm remembering this was a couple days ago. It was maybe like 2-1 or 3-1. I rolled a 9. It was a +4. I got like a 13, and it was like a D3 or a DE result or something crazy like that. And a whole division with an armor asset was obliterated. It must have been a DE result because it destroyed the asset as well. They didn't get to relocate it. And actually, this would have been in range of this depot, I think. But for asset transfer, but it in one fell swoop, right? I mean, it was a combined attack. It had both of these U.S. divisions attacking. We had an attack bonus due to a accelerated attack. So it was some big numbers, and they just totally annihilated an entire North Korean division, full strength with an armor asset, obliterated, taken off the map. Um, and so it seems like that, and this is probably appropriate given what happened, historically. But we've definitely seen a case now in the game where the strategic initiative is being lost by the North Koreans, as it should, and we may be a little behind on some of the progress we need to make, but as the UN player, but these guys are too weak to realistically um, be able to take the city now, and even if they did, wouldn't matter much. This is going to fall. This guy's in trouble. This guy's toast. Really. Um, and then in the area around Incheon, I should show one thing I did have to make an adjustment for, and I had the option to do this when I landed. I just didn't do it. So there's this minesweeper, which means that this port can't be used for supply. But anytime you do a naval invasion, you can use a UN beachhead marker, of which we have, I think, two. Um, and I can take it off the map later. So for this guy to be able to have supply, uh, I have him with the UN beachhead marker. Now, granted, I don't have a depot here, so he is actually not defending at full strength. And the North Koreans have swung a division, full strength division and armor down here to try to pressure the Marines. But in an attack on Seoul, we had partially reduced. I guess I can flip him back up. Partially reduced the division. So it's a little tricky here. I don't think it's going to matter much because what's going to happen is we're going to get a depot, a one level depot into this beachhead, and then uh, this guy's going to be fine for supply and will likely get to go first. So we'll probably see him try to push this guy out because we don't want him to move here, and then that would cause supply problem. It's a whole thing, right? So this is a little dicey, but all the Marines have to do is kind of hold the line, and they'll be fine. They'll be fine. Uh, and we can still potentially land some other units over here or down here uh, amphibiously in this turn because I don't think I've used our amphibious capacity point. So there you go, guys. That's turn 5, action phase 1, which means there's still plenty to have happen here. But I did a lot of it off camera just because I thought the game was going to end. I do think that the game can continue because the UN have managed to basically um, greatly weaken the attacking North Korean forces in the southern part of the peninsula. The battle for the retaking of Seoul is kind of back on, or is at least threatening things, and I'm willing to see kind of what happens here. But that does mean you guys missed out on a few reinforcements. So there was there's this parachute regiment, which if we want to optionally break him up into a bunch of regiments and land the parachute regiments on the map, we could have done that. It's nothing too crazy. I think what it's meant to do is like cut guys out of supply or cut retreat paths behind enemy lines. But at the time, we were so pressed around Pusan that I would have rather have had a decent, full strength division, or not division, regiment come in and help defend. And it was valuable to have him there. He did help. So I did not use the parachute units, paratroopers, in their trained role. I had them join as infantry to just kind of help defend the port, and that worked out. So something else I need to throw out there. You could, if you're playing this game, decide to use them to break them up into the battalions, land them, but they're not really combat worthy units at that point. So just something to throw out there. Okay, so from here, guys, I'm going to do the second action phase. I'll take a little cut to give myself a chance to get organized for that. But long intro, but I wanted to make sure you guys had the set context. It also may mean that this video is going to be much more than turn 5. Um, so we'll see where we get. All right. Okay, here we are, second action phase for turn 5. Um, and we've done the reinforcements and the supply rolls. So the tide of fortune continues to turn in favor of the UN forces. The North Koreans suffered a 0 die roll for the reinforcements, so no new divisions or armor in support, which, I mean, I think right now they're probably feeling like that would be very useful. The UN actually lucked out in that I rolled very high for the Republic of Korea reinforcement table, which means, amazingly, I wasn't sure we were ever going to see one. Here is a South Korean division that we would put into Pusan. Pusan is max stacking right now, so we put it adjacent, which it's really interesting because it's a -2 to the die roll for that, or I'm sorry, -3 for the die roll, but because I rolled an 8, we still got a 5, which was enough for one division, and because it's turn 4 or later, we get a full strength division. So that's why it's not a regiment like we would have gotten before. It's a full-on division, and that will stay for the rest of the game. And then the other thing will be when we reclaim Taejon, which it looks like I am missing a control marker. I don't know why that is. There we go. I must have brushed it somewhere. Oh well. When they get control of Seoul again, Taejon and Taegu, they won't have a -3 anymore, and will actually have a pretty good chance each action round of getting more South Korean divisions. And we're going to need them because for as strong as the UN units are, there's not that many of them. And if we're going to have to cover a front, we're going to need some South Koreans to do it. So that was very good. The Allied UN reinforcements, we basically got some of these. It's a Turkish brigade, a British brigade, and a British armor, which I had sent into Pusan, and likewise they moved to the next adjacent hex. And then what we also got were some divisions, or I'm sorry, regiments, and an armor. And I think what I'm going to do with these guys is that I'm going to probably, I think Busan is safe. Overwhelming defense there should be safe. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these regiments off because I don't think they're as needed as they were. Or I'm going to find maybe this guy. Send him off the map, and then I will recombine 3 American regiments into a division, and then we'll eventually try to ship them into Incheon to support the Marines. That's sort of, I think historically, the Marines went along with one other UN division. Right now, our Marines are by themselves over here, and I can't get reinforcements to them because of the mines here. But we still have the beachhead, which is what I'm using for supply. We did get, I put one level 1 depot there. We managed to roll just barely enough to get a limited commitment. We got 1 supply, which I spent for limited commitment. So that's good there. At least he's going to have direct supply and be full strength. And then over here, we had the 2, which managed to roll just enough to get 1 supply point and get limited so that they can at least operate here. The North Koreans had pulled back their depot back to here. They rolled well enough to get 1 supply point and a limited commitment as well. They pulled back just to make sure that they could get better supply, and that was worth it, essentially, by being in the Gyeonggi province. Here you guys can barely see the outline because of the glare, but it's clear to me. It's better die rolling for supply points. So they had pulled back. It does mean that some of these guys deep around Pusan are toast, because they don't have good supply range tracking, but they may be able to get into range if they move, a strategic move and just try to get somewhere closer to this road line. That may be enough to keep them in some level of command range, but it seems like they're going to go poof. Maybe I can save these guys and pull them back, just so that we have something to slow down the UN forces. The reason why we would still want to, like, we wouldn't just let these guys kind of be a problem down here, is we need to keep supply to hold on to Seoul. Every turn that we delay the advance of the UN, like, we know the UN is going to sweep up the peninsula, right? I mean, that's is what is going to happen. The reason why we want to still try to delay them where we can is that the fewer victory points they get each turn for retaking the cities, the harder it is going to be for the UN to win. So us performing pretty well as the North Koreans this early, even if we lost a lot of guys, could come back and win us the game because the UN can't make enough victory points, or it's going to force them to enter, near the Chinese border to try to make up the point deficit, and that could be, volatile. The main thing is, we've not covered it yet. That global tension level hasn't gone up, but when it does start to go up, it starts to affect the UN victory point rating. So the UN player could actually lose victory points. So they need to be gaining victory points by holding on to cities. And then as global tension rises with different events happening, they'll start to lose victory points. And they have to hope that their gain is greater than their loss and that they hit the thresholds that they're going to need for victory. And we'll take a closer look at that in a couple of turns. I don't want to worry about it too much right now, but we'll be able to calculate just how hard it's going to be for the UN to make progress here. Okay, I've covered all of that. I'm going to take care of the operations phase. Again, you guys have seen all the combat mechanics. I don't feel the need to show that, but you can see there's a fair bit of UN forces down here. Don't be surprised to see them be sweeping the North Koreans up a little bit. These guys possibly retreating. And we'll see what happens over here. And then with our one amphibious capacity left this turn, I probably will be using it to evacuate a regiment to form up a new unit on the map somewhere. So we'll look at doing that here shortly. And because the UN got 2 supply points spent across the 2 different depots, though at different levels, they have an initiative of 2. The North Koreans have an initiative of 1, which means that the UN player will get to go first as they start executing their operations. So that's an important thing because that may mean we get to catch some of these North Korean units while they're panzer bound and still hurt them, or get into a better position over here to maintain our momentum. So, all right, guys, we'll be right back. Okay, here we are at the end of turn 5 and about to start turn 6. I do think I'm going to cut this video here as I close up, and we'll hit turn 6 in another video because I think there's some new stuff that's going to be more relevant in that turn. But very generally speaking, it's been a rock solid turn for the UN. So I'm going to go kind of air mobile for a second with the camera and the stand. So we've kind of cleared our way out of here. Some of the heavier units deployed to try to crack the line, and unfortunately a fair number of the North Korean divisions, or the remnant divisions, managed to get away, or at least are retreating back towards Seoul, where there may be a cauldron fight around there, but I can't imagine they're going to stick around very long. So you can see them starting to run back. Over here, units that were relieved at Kumchan are now kind of running around trying to get into these cities to kind of free them up. I think I need a garrison there, actually. That's my bad. Not just a control marker. Yeah, that's not a port. Okay. So, these guys are over here, intended to liberate this city. We got Masan, though we got a few stragglers behind that used all their actions to to get to capture the city itself. Some more guys that just didn't quite have enough movement points to get everywhere that they wanted to be. So they got to kind of take care of that. Taijan freed up, and yeah, so that's kind of where things stand. So very generally, I think I think I can just start moving the camera around a little more. Like this, we'll have to fight the glare a little bit, guys, but we'll deal with that. I'll figure out the right way to deal with that. So to wrap up the turn, I think the weight has shifted clearly. The fact that the North Koreans are trying to run just not to be destroyed, because they're very soon they're going to have trouble getting reinforcements, and they're going to be heavily reliant on Chinese intervention. We've not covered that because it hasn't been relevant yet. There's certain conditions. I mean, we talked about it in a previous video, but it's going to be a little more realistic now because the conditions required to try to get Chinese intervention are going to be a little more reasonable here. The UN forces do not want to waste much time. They need to recapture the rest of these cities. They need to be swiftly moving up the peninsula. They need to get control of Seoul. And I think without a doubt, there is no incentive right now to hold back in front of the 38th parallel. We are going to need the UN forces to surge across. The reason is they need to make up a victory point deficit that they're suffering. So as it stands right now, the UN victory at the end of this turn, victory point tally is 43. If I did that right, yeah, 43. I think I counted all the correct. Counted all the correct spaces. I may double check that again. Well, all right. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna double check it. Okay, yeah, it was up to 43. So 43 victory points. I gained 15 this turn. So while I had something like I only gained like 8, 5 or something the previous turn, this was 15. Control of those cities does matter, and it matters quite a bit. And for the UN to make headway here, they're going to have to make sure they seize as many city victory point locations in North Korea as they can. So that's their incentive to not wait at the border. A lot of this is because, in terms of the history, we're like the UN is a month behind schedule. Like it should have been last turn that we were crossing 38th parallel. The fact that we're still, breaking out of the perimeter and trying to get into Seoul in turn 6 is at the beginning of turn 6 is not great for the UN, and that will show itself in the victory points. And just to explain why that's so important, that in terms of the victory conditions, assuming that we don't have a military victory, which I'm not even sure I can contemplate that right now. So there's like UN military victory, which is going to require taking some of those cities that are at the border with China for 2 consecutive action phases, right? It's not just you get it and you win, you have to hold it for 2 consecutive action phases. Otherwise, it's going to be about victory points. So if you look, it's a number value. If you are below 159 as the UN player, the North Korean player wins, the communists win. If you get 159, that's enough for a marginal victory. So if you're just looking at like winning or losing, the degree of winning or losing aside for a second, 159 is kind of the magic number. If I can get 159, then we're okay. So if I look at, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 turns are left, you can do a little bit of math here, right? If it's 159, we need 116 more victory points. 116. And 116 across the next 7 turns isn't. It's going to be sporty, right? I need to get basically. I need to get like 16 16 victory points each turn or more, or something like that. Um, so we're gonna have to push. We're gonna have to push harder. Mathematically, I do have to wonder, like, is this gonna? I don't know. It's gonna be tight. I feel like it's gonna be tight. You know, we need 159 if we're at 43. I don't know. That's going to be interesting because you know there's going to be waxing and waning, and it's going to depend really on how far the Chinese get when they intervene. So that's kind of where we're at. If I manage to retake Seoul, I actually might be able to sit and get a marginal victory. Like if I just get up to here and I don't cross the 38th parallel, I actually might be that might be enough victory points to get a marginal victory and just win if I hold at the border. The only problem will be that if the Chinese intervene and they sweep down the peninsula and they push us back and they take just enough, like these victory hexes right here, that would be enough to keep us below the limit. So I think that's still the incentive to go across the 38th parallel. I think you kind of have to try and be in a better position. And rather than go for an outright military victory by trying to get all the way up here, we set up a defensive line somewhere along here and hope for the best. That's what I did in Korea Fire and Ice because I just think it seems to want to work out that way better. But we'll have to see how it goes. So, all right, guys, we'll call that a video. Turn 5. Next one will be turn 6, and the game will continue on. Thank you for watching. Take care. Keep gaming.